Hello, and welcome to Outright Libertarians' first webinar called How to Be an Effective Ally. My name is Leslee Peterson, and I am a queer and alternative relationship coach. And with me is Mike Shipley.
Hi, I'm Mike Shipley. I'm chair of the organization Outright Libertarians. I'm a gay man. My pronouns are he and him. I go by Mikester, so you can call me Mikester if you want. And I'm really excited to be here today, so thank you all for joining us.
Yay! I need to clarify that I am a bisexual, femme, polyamorous female. My pronouns are she, her.
So a couple of ground rules here. We just want to let you guys know that, let you all know to please save your questions for the end. We're going to try to cover quite a bit of material up front, and then we have some time blocked out at the end to really take some detailed answers to your questions. So we're going to go through the why, and the how of being a strong ally, so allyship. And Leslee, do you want to take a quick chance to explain why GSM?
Yeah, so Outright Libertarians, as of our last national convention, uses the acronym GSM, which stands for Gender and Sexual Minorities. We do so because it is a more inclusive and long-lasting acronym than the LGBTQQAI plus sign that continues to grow as time goes on. GSM includes things that LGBT still does not, like polyamory, BDSM, and fetishists, as well as consensual sex workers. So as outright libertarians, we take the stance to be all-inclusive in our terminology.
Yay! So I personally am really excited about GSM, and I hope everyone else will too. I know it isn't easy to, at first, to really get used to using a different acronym, but for me, the more that I say it, the more it says, you know, it's inclusive and I like it. So a quick note about as far as terminology. First of all, when human beings used to live in the closet, they didn't have a chance to really explore the space outside the closet. Now that we do, and now that we've had that opportunity for quite a while, there is some terminology that continues to come to the surface for people to describe their different, you know, experiences. So just want you all to know, these words are not liberal plots to divide us, but there are different words like queer, bi, pan, poly, all of these words to describe our experience. So we're going to do a terminology 101, but I want to just up front talk about queer and versus GSM, because you'll hear people using the word queer. Leslee, do you want to explain what the difference there is?
So queer is a term generally used by people who fall outside of our stereotypical conventions. So anybody who is a gender, sexual minority or a relationship minority. It tends to be used by the younger generations, Gen X, Y, and the millennials. It is a reclaimed slur, and because it is a reclaimed slur, it is best for the time being that people who use it are part of the in-group, who are already gender and sexual minorities. It's difficult for many people of the older generations, particularly to hear people in the outside group, people who are gender and sexual majority group members, using slurs that they may have once heard. So as a note, Outright Libertarians and myself request that you don't use queer unless you are a member of our community.
So that's a great, I guess the way I would summarize that, just to give you a rule of thumb, is don't identify another person as queer. Always leave that to be something that they have the opportunity to self-identify. So a self-identified queer person is totally okay. You calling somebody else queer without them self-identifying that, yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, so you will hear me frequently call myself queer, but I would not venture to call Mike queer unless he already used that terminology.
and I go back and forth. I use GSM, especially quite a bit through my work with outright libertarians. I like the queer identity though, because it kind of like, I'm not into really conformist or assimilation. So, but I think we're rambling a little bit because we'll come back into that in some of our later webinars.
So I'd like to have us talk a little bit about the challenges that may be presented to our audience emotionally and mentally as we go through our webinar. Think of these as kind of trigger warnings. We are going to refer to the GSM community. This is our primary mission with this webinar, is to teach you goals on how to represent us and how to help be our allies. But this is not for our allies. This is for us. The goal of this is to provide the GSM community better allies. We'd also like to talk about how identity politics may come up. Identity politics are not manufactured by the left for purely political reasons. Identity politics exist because people have different identities. And Mike's got the next one.
So I just want everyone to understand that we cannot be competitive on GSM issues unless we learn how to navigate those conversations in terms that are dignified and respectful. And so I really feel like there's a great opportunity there, because libertarian political theory has the right answers to questions of systemic oppression. I mean, the answer is to get the state out of the way. But really connecting with another human being on what that actually means and how it relates to their experience as an individual, you know, you have to be careful in the way that you speak to another person. And until we really find a way to compete our way through that challenge, then the Democrats are going to have a corner on those voters. And that's just our reality.
And they shouldn't, because we've always been the thought leaders when it comes to GSM issues politically.
Yes. So let's go into, speaking of libertarian political theory, you know, of course, our policy ideas are based on the philosophy. So let's start with the philosophy and relate that to how, to GSM issues through the libertarian lens. So, you know, it's really, I can't stress to you enough, for anybody that wants to really put action behind their desire to be a strong ally, to learn how to express philosophically through libertarian ideas what that really means. Because we are the party of principle, and it's just, that's really kind of, that's the goal, is to be able to do that. So what is our first principle? It's self-ownership. Leslee, do you want to kind of go into that one a little bit?
Yeah, so self-ownership in libertarianism and how it applies to GSM issues comes down to the simple fact that self-actualized individualism is the entire point of liberating ourselves from coercive systems. In other words, if I'm not able to experience self-actualization, I am not free. We see this frequently when it comes to the state coercing people with gender identity. Saying the other day in conversation came down to, if I know better how to live my life than anyone else, then others know best how to live their lives. You do not know another person's gender identity better than they know it themselves.
So in other words, don't tell me how to be trans. Don't tell me how to be queer. Don't tell me how to be gay. Don't tell me how to be me, because you don't own me.
Don't tell me how to be a woman.
Either.
Don't tell you how to be a man. We get to decide our own.
Exactly. So there is a word, and it's not like libertarians don't know this word, but we typically use self-ownership. A word that resonates on the left is autonomy.
Bodily autonomy.
My autonomy over my own body and my own choices. For example, if I'm going to practice a consensual kink act, or if I'm going to choose to donate blood after having had sex within the past year, which is actually not legal, and we'll talk about that later. It's really, we place ourselves in a really strong position when we're able to relate to that first principle as it relates to gender and sexual non-conforming behaviors.
The next principle of libertarian philosophy is the non-aggression principle. And I'm sure you guys hear this all the time, my NIP. But how it applies to GSM libertarianism is that GSM liberation is not about imposing your or my cultural values, norms, or morals on anyone else. It's about the ability to live with our own cultural norms and values without aggressing on others or being aggressed against.
So let me just follow up on that, because the logic kind of follows in a deductive way. So self-ownership said, I didn't own you and you didn't own me, so I don't know your gender and you don't own mine. So the non-aggression says, I don't get to physically use force to control your gender expression. I don't get to physically use force to impose my cultural values. See how that, like, it escalates that one principle to the next level of an issue. And so that kind of understanding how those building blocks go brings us to the next one, right? If I own myself and you own yourself and I don't have a right to compel you and you don't have a right to compel me, then the only one that has a right to take responsibility for my choices is me. So I have personal responsibility, and there's, like the word implies, a responsibility that comes with that. And the same with the other person. I give them room to be responsible for their own choices. So here's where we get to risk-aware, consensual kink behaviors, the mutual decisions that we make when we practice safe sex, right? Sex work is another one.
And this is an example of how the state gets in the way of personal responsibility with consensual sex work. They're criminalizing consensual voluntary interactions between adults.
So hopefully this kind of section of the webinar has given you a better idea of how you can relate libertarian philosophical philosophy to the GSM experience. But let's go into a little bit more now about what that looks like on the level of policy, right? Because we know that the general population has made this error in reasoning that they own one another and that they should be using the political hierarchy to impose cultural values on one another. That that horse already left the barn, kind of, so to speak. So our opportunity as libertarians now is to kind of dismantle that. So we want to be able to look at the different ideas and critique them one by one. So the first point to really be aware of, Leslee, do you want to?
Yeah, so frequently when you hear candidates talking about GSM issues, they'll say things like gay marriage or gay rights. This in particular is really erasing of different queer identities. The marriage issue applied to bisexual and queer individuals. It applied to transgender individuals. It applies to polyamorous individuals. So we're going, a solution to that and a way for you to be an effective ally on this issue is to make sure to use our acronym of GSM when it comes to GSM issues like marriage, so that we're not intentionally or unintentionally erasing different queer identities who are also impacted by this poor legislation.
So I know that we kind of earlier, we referred to the fact that we're going to be doing a terminology 101, but this might be kind of a cool moment to look at what are we saying when we say binary language versus like an inclusive language. So bi means two, right? So bisexual means two. It means kind of the focused, cisgender gender roles of male and female. Bi means two, right? And so pan means across, But where I'm going with this is when we limit the words that we use to ones that are of the binary, like Leslie just observed, we erase everybody else who's on that spectrum. So that kind of goes beyond simply just like not saying gay or allowing the other person to self-identify as bi or pan, but it even goes into the gender pronouns that we use. So for example, not assuming that somebody is a he or she, but using they, the singular they. And if you don't believe me, I'm not even going to go into it. Just go Google it. The Webster, Merriam-Webster, you know, the Oxford.
Can we just use the coffee house example?
Yeah.
We see it all the time. We already use gender neutral second person pronouns when referring to people that we're unaware of. Say you were in a coffee shop and you saw somebody had left their hat. Your response is, oh, I wonder if they know they left their hat. You're already using gender neutral pronouns. You're just having a hard time making that connect to a person that you're visually assigning a gender to without their input. You are not taking into account their self-ownership and knowledge of their own gender, but yet you're imposing yours on top of that.
Right. So that really goes back to this idea that, and rightfully so, a great number of libertarians want to be really careful that they don't get onto a slippery slope to, you know, collectivist ideas. Now, I'm here to tell you that, I mean, it's okay. That's why we have the non-aggression principle. So, like, we're never in danger of suddenly some weird collective thing, like, happening, you know. But I digress. They just want to be careful about not using pronouns and thinking that it might be, like, some kind of, you know, linguistic plot to, like it's mind control. Yeah, and it's not. It's just a way to use language. They, singular they, it's okay. And another example, not only, and let me real quick, it's okay to just ask also, what gender pronouns do you prefer? And it's okay to do that too. It's not rude, it's actually empowering.
Yeah, you guys witnessed our introductions at the beginning, and Mike offered his pronouns for y'all to use when you comment, and I offered mine. So you can always ask, or the person may offer it. It is respectful to use the pronoun preference that the person has offered you.
One more thing that doesn't immediately, it's not obvious until you really know about it, and then you'll notice that you are using this, is instead of saying brothers and sisters, because we do have like a unity or a solidarity within the GSM community. And I will pause you here to let you know that even within GSM spaces, not everybody is at the same level of having absorbed all of these nuances. So, you know, we meet people where they're at, and you'll even hear GSM people referring to each other as brothers and sisters. But the way to get away from the binary in that situation is to use the word siblings. So instead of saying my brothers and sisters in the, you know, in the pride parade, we would say my siblings.
So
that's a way to embrace everybody.
Yeah, a way to do that in your everyday speech and become a better effective ally for us is if you sign an email to your Libertarian Party, instead of saying brothers and sisters in liberty, say siblings in liberty.
Exactly. So next, we get to take on the giant, absurd issue of cakes.
You know, I was at karaoke the other night and I took the cake home.
Oh, did you eat it too?
We ate it at the bar, yeah. My little triad and I. We shared with the bartender. She was really cute.
Was it a gay cake or was it just cake?
It was just a cake, but it was at the gay bar.
All right. So listen, yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Oh, I was going to start. Most of us should be aware of the black hole issue of baking the cake that has come up recently in this election season with Gary Johnson's answer on, was it Stossel? Freedom of association is a strong principle in libertarianism, but framing freedom of association entirely around acts of discrimination like Nazi cakes or gay wedding cakes and Christian bakers, is a black hole and a losing issue for us. There are plenty of ways that freedom of association can be a winning issue for libertarianism and GSM issues. And Mike's got some examples.
So yeah, so letting them place the cake frame around that issue, it erases some really positive reasons that GSM people ourselves choose to self-segregate. So here are some examples. A lesbian bar is typically a place where men are not welcome, and that depending on the lesbian bar can men. So and if, you know, because, and let's be real here, lesbians are fetishized by straight men. And they show up at the bar and they think that everybody wants them because I guess lesbians are sitting around waiting to have three-ways with straight men. I don't know why but anyway, I'm digressing.
Because they have a magical dick. They have a magical dick.
They have a magical dick that lesbians want. So lesbian bars have a way to deal with that. And one of the ways that I experienced as a gay man is being overcharged for a week drink, right? So have you ever been to like a concert or something and you go to the bar and you wait like an hour and then they take this tiny little shot cup and they're like, dink, and they put it in your drink? Well, you know, that's not usually, like, if you've been to you know, a gay bar, the drinks are usually pretty stiff, right? We know how to pour a drink, right? Well, if a lesbian bar is trying to, like, you know, control their space, they'll give you a wink. Like, they literally I watched them pour really, really like yummy drinks for other people. And then, oh, dink. And she, you know, so, and it was like, I can't even taste this. Why am I even drinking this? Why did I just pay $8 for this drink? So that's it. Guess what? They don't want men in there, and they have a right to control that space. They could have just told me to my face, but I would have been even more shocked. And by the way, if you've ever experienced a denial of service, it's not a pleasant thing. So don't ever let somebody trivialize that as feels like it matters, right? It doesn't justify, you know, initiating force, but I digress yet again. The next example is a leather bar. So a leather bar is a place where gay and bisexual men gather to fetishize masculinity. So there was a case of a Denver gay bar and Denver is one of these places with a public accommodation law and a non-discrimination law. So in Denver, you cannot exclude people from spaces for certain characteristics, and gender is one of them. So they were, basically they got sued by a drag queen who tried to go there and was said, you know, well, this doesn't meet our dress code. Well, guess what? If, without like getting into how difficult it is for gay men to be completely masculine among one another, when you introduce a feminized expression of the male body into that space, it just like it crashes the vibe. It just does. It can. So depending on the leather bar, some of them you know, are quite welcoming, and others are like, okay, no, this is our space. And guess what? That's okay. It's totally okay. So those are two great examples. And I think Leslie might have a couple of more.
Yeah, no, actually, I don't remember the example that I want to talk about. So,
well, do you want to talk about safe spaces?
I would love to talk about safe spaces.
Yay!
I know, right? So recently in the libertarian and conservative communities, we've seen a pushback against forced safe spaces on college campuses where they try to make the entire campus a safe space for everybody. This is kind of, not to be crude, but a bastardization of what safe spaces are meant to be. Safe spaces are a market response to a need expressed by the community for a safe space. Classic examples are gay bars, lesbian bars, LGBT community centers where it's restricted to this one building. You have a code of conduct in it. You know that you're going to be safe and welcome there. People who are antagonizing are not welcome, but you're not using force to exclude them. Like, Mike was not welcome in the lesbian bar, so he got poured a weak drink, but they didn't like physically kick him out. So safe spaces and trigger warnings are both market responses to community needs and desires. Yeah, from mutual shared association.
Yeah, you know, I really like how you emphasize that it's basically a response to a market signal. So if we're observing that our space is being, you know, the safety of a space is being violated by antagonistic voices entering, that's letting us know that we need to establish some sort of boundary. And that's a completely, like, it was just like, a great example is like when you walk into a restaurant and it says no shirt, no shoes, no service. Well, yeah, you should wear clothes to a restaurant. I'm sorry, but you just maybe should, you know. Meh.
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, you know.
There's some really great examples for libertarians creating what are effectively safe spaces. They just refuse to use the word. Every year I go to PorcFest and I speak at PorcFest on polyamory, mental health, things like that. But the community that we create there, even for that short period of time, on that space is a safe space for us to express our philosophy and our shared interests without other people getting in. We have people at the gate. We make sure that you have to have a ticket to get in. Electors show up last year and we peacefully ran them out because they were in violation of what we felt was our safe space, even if we didn't apply that word to it. So safe spaces are used by all sorts of people. Another classic example of what a safe space is would be VFW halls, Veterans of Foreign Wars halls. It is a community space limited usually to 1 or 2 buildings voluntarily that people go to where they feel like they don't have to censor themselves or worry about being antagonized, enjoy companionship in that relaxed environment. But when they leave, they are still back in the real world. So there are conservative and liberal versions of safe spaces, even if they don't use the same word.
So I think the takeaway from that is when you hear the word safe space when you're in contact with the mainstream liberal community, don't panic. Just substitute free association, like in your brain, just translate that because that's all it is.
Safe spaces are freedom of association.
They're just freedom of association. And guess what? A baker that won't serve you is just creating safe space for their cakes.
It's
so,
okay. I don't want to pay him money.
Right. Keep your cake. Keep it cheap, nasty cake. All right. Now I want to move on to the next one. So this one is about hate crimes and the idea that it's a special right to like not be beat and murdered. So letting that be placed on the frame of special rights. Now, don't get me wrong. There are actually 2 kinds of hate crime laws. So before a person critiques those, they should probably be sure to know like which kind it is, because one kind of hate crime law actually does make it kind of a different level, not kind of, it does make a different level of penalty for a particular act. So that's when you hear, like the thought crime thing. Like, how did you know what I was thinking as I beat that person? Well, it was obviously a hate crime, but it was crime anyway. So, you know, that's where the other kind of hate crime law comes in, because there's the one that makes it a different level, which is not, doesn't fit the criteria, egalitarian criteria for a libertarian political system. And then there's the other kind, which simply says that the state, like the police, the local policing force cannot ignore that crime. And that is what we saw happening in a lot of places, is that the police would make a value judgment based on the character of the person they found had been victimized, and they would divert the resources or apply them depending on their own social attitudes towards that crime. So if they find, a transgender sex worker, well, she deserved it or whatever, that just, throw her in a dumpster and like walk away. Yeah. But if it's like, a white middle-class suburban mom who's found dead in her minivan, oh my gosh, call out the dogs. We've got to solve this right away. Do you see how, and that doesn't meet the criteria of an egalitarian system. If the state's going to protect us from initiations of force, then it has to protect us all, because we're all taxed to pay for that.
Liberty is not liberty unless it applies to everyone.
Right. So we've got to make sure when we talk about that, for one, that we're not just blundering through a conversation that's not relevant to the type of legislation we're talking about, but more even so than that, and this is important, is that when we let that conversation be shifted over to hate crimes, then we miss the point that we had a chance to talk about self-defense. And there's a really empowering message to be had that you have a right to, guess what? You have a right to arm yourself for home and personal defense and shoot back.
Yeah, what's that quote that Pink Pistols uses? Armed gays shoot back.
Armed gays don't get bashed.
Armed gays don't get bashed. Dang it, I've been with them for like 3 years and I got that wrong. I blame it on stage fright, y'all. It's
all right. And while we're on this, and this error in reasoning that is, oh, that there's this monolithic liberal left and all gays must by default gays, be anti-gun. That is so far from the truth. I can't even tell you how far from the truth. Anybody that was raised in a conservative home or a conservative state or, was taught how to shoot as a child, they don't have that same fear. Like it isn't, if it's a Venn diagram, the overlap is really not that great. There are a lot of...
It's not acknowledged either. I live in rural North Carolina, and the most liberal city near me is Asheville, North Carolina, which is like the gay vacation spot of the US. Everyone goes there. They like to think of themselves as the San Francisco of the East Coast. But you get there and you'll go to the queer bar and you'll talk to them, and I'll talk about Pink Pistols. We held a fundraiser there a while ago, and you'd be surprised. All of them are like, wow, yeah, I used to shoot all the time with my family. I haven't gone shooting in a long time. I'd love to go. This again.
Yeah. So and that's one of our, we'll tell you on our Facebook page, that is consistently almost always the #1 type of content that we share. Every time we put a meme or a story or anything at the intersection of gun rights and gay rights, it goes like viral like instantly. Like, so that's telling me, that's a market signal for me to recognize that there's a real opportunity for libertarians to, build some bridges there.
Yeah, there's a wonderful opening right now. Unfortunately, in wake of a disaster, Pink Pistols National saw a 400% growth in membership after the Orlando massacre back in June. But it opened up a dialogue between the gun community and the gender sexual minority communities about arming themselves. And they saw this huge amount of growth. It was both allies and GSM community members. But our local shoots have increased. And one of the things you'll notice is the people who happen to be at that intersection are very open-minded to libertarianism. So that is an effective way for you to talk about libertarian philosophy and how it applies to GSM issues.
It is. And if I could just give one more anecdote, I organized for the Pink Pistols here in Phoenix for a while, and we did a Pride outreach booth. And this doesn't have to be a Pink Pistols thing. It can be a libertarian thing too. Don't be afraid to get creative with your booth space. What we did is we got those little, I don't know if you've ever seen those like rubber band pistol guns. And we did a rubber band, like a gun activity, like a shooting activity. And then their prize was we gave away little pink water pistols. So you can give out rainbow ones or just give pink ones. They'll get the reference. And of course it's hot on Pride Day, so people run around like squirting each other. And I mean, we ran out of pistols, and I gathered like 200 names that day. And, we had a giant shoot the next month. So those are really powerful ways to build that bridge and invite people to cross over it in a way that, that empowers them to actually be safe from hate crimes. So we can win on that issue. Do you see where we're going with that? Like, we can really fight and win on these issues.
Yep. The next one is when it comes to having issues like this, self-defense, freedom of association, state coerce, gender binaries, we need our candidates to give us parallel priority to other issues. We cannot be a back burner priority only to be brought up on Pride Day or in election seasons. We need to be given equal priority with other issues if we're going to compete with the Democrats who have seemed to have co-opted our identity for their use.
Right. You know, I can't tell you enough times. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a particular comment thread. And, you know, I've been doing this since 2013. I've been an officer of Outright. So I'm going on, was it follow 20? Maybe almost 4 years now. Right. But anyway, so, you know, I go ahead and try to like touch this issue however often I can. And I can't tell you how many times I get pushback. Well, like, why did you even bring that up? That's so not important. Why would you even bother with that when like we need to end the Fed? And I'm like, well, you know, for a person who is literally in danger of being murdered in a bathroom because you forced them into it, they don't have the privilege of putting that on a back burner. So we really want to ask our allies to recognize that placing GSM issues at a level of equality, it means understanding where they intersect and mentioning them where they're appropriate. So if we're talking about migration, there are people being, you know, there are places
denied
where there's
green cards.
Denied green cards. They're it's a death penalty still in some places. In Russia, there's this thing where they're luring men on Twitter. It's like a subculture where they lure them on Twitter and then they beat them on YouTube. Like, I mean, it's a total thing. Those people come here looking for safety, and we send them back. Right. So when immigration is being talked about, that's a great way. Police brutality. We have Black Lives Matter happening right now. Trans women of color in particular at that intersection are so much suffering. It's a great chance to place that issue again at that equal level. Restrooms, prison abuse. I could go on.
Yeah. But intersectionality is. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Intersectionality is not a term that can only be used by the left. We can use it as well, because when you have issues of police abuse and institutional racism and GSM issues, they do intersect, and people who fall on those intersections do take the brunt of these issues.
Yeah, and again, I can't, with the idea of being competitive, I can't tell you how much more refined and cosmopolitan and cutting edge you can make your candidacy if you're able to weave these issues through any conversation about liberty. I mean, I just, you know, I don't know, there's really the only way to like lose is to like block it out and assign it to being a liberal plot and not deal with it. But any, you know, anybody who is willing to put, like I said, action behind their desire to be a strong ally and figure out how to speak these issues into their campaigns is going to be on a really solid footing. So some of you were at the convention in Orlando and some of you weren't. We're going to link you a little bit later to a document that we prepared called Get Your Laws Off Our Backs. And it basically goes through point by point a series of laws, examples of where the state initiates coercive force against the community to control our gender and sexual life. So examples of that are forcing us to acquire a document at our birth that we carry through our entire lives, resulting in a compulsory gender. Another example, and I think Leslie might want to go into this a little bit more, is conversion therapy.
Yeah, so if we look back to that first principle of libertarian philosophy, self-ownership leads into self-actualization. Many places in our country, including the Midwest and the South, view conversion therapy as an appropriate appropriate course of action if their child ends up being a member of the GSM community against their wishes. We have a vice presidential candidate who has been rumored to be supporting state-forced conversion therapy on youth. Conversion therapy is a form of abuse in that it's forcing an individual to deny their self-ownership and their self-actualization in an attempt to get them to conform to another person's cultural norms and values. So a great way for you to be an ally is to frame conversion therapy as a violation of the non-aggression principle against these individuals who are being forced into it.
Right. So, and let's be clear, children are under a compulsory, they're compelled to attend school. Their parents can be held accountable if they're truant. So, and they're, you know, without veering too much off track, the Libertarian Party has kind of, we used to have a really strong plank that spoke to the youth. And I want to make it, it's important to understand because the current platform basically treats young people as property of their parents. And it says that their parents, you know, can basically do whatever they want in terms of.
That's a very right libertarian view. Comes from Rothbard.
But the thing is, you know, we just went through this with one of our candidates who was asked about a position on vaccinations, and the libertarian community very strongly came forward and it asserted that we believe in freedom of choice over our medical decisions, and that it is a self-ownership issue. So I want to make sure everyone is clear on the idea that youth also should have a chance to deny medical care. If for example, Leela Alcorn, who was a transgender young woman who committed suicide, pretty high profile case about last year, maybe a year and a half ago.
2 years. 2 years ago.
2 years. She would still be able today, maybe. You know, the rates are still pretty high. You know, there's no guarantee. But her parents were pushing her through this conversion therapy, and it's psychologically abusive. You can't teach a person that something they can't change needs to be changed, and that they are sick because they can't change it. It's like it's more than just traumatizing. Like, a person can want to die to escape that. Do you see? So having us stand up for their right to deny that medical care is a really empowering thing that we can do.
Another example of getting laws off our back is when we talk about BDSM and kink and fetishist practitioners. Many states still have laws that basically criminalize people who practice BDSM. If you are outed against your will from the BDSM community, you face loss of employment. You risk your housing being taken away from you. You lose parental rights to your children. Often these are related to obscenity laws. There's a law in Texas where owning more than 6 dildos is a felony. I'm not quite sure how owning a certain number of dildos is criminal, but they have done it. They've criminalized it. These things take away our self-responsibility. If we're not allowed to decide that 7 dildos is enough for me, I mean, I think I might have way more than that. That's my responsibility to decide at what point does this become an issue for me. It's my responsibility to decide if I want to have kinky sex, which I do, but like, I get to decide the safe word. I decide the hand signals. I decide my limits. by criminalizing kink, by criminalizing gender and sexual issues, we take away a person's ability to be self-responsible.
Right. And the question I'm sure is on everybody's mind right now is there ever such a thing as too many dildos?
No. No.
So now let me give you a practical example here, because this is all joking about dildos aside. Not that dildos aren't serious, because I am serious about mine. No, just kidding. So there was a young woman here in Phoenix who was more or less lured into some risky behaviors with a much older man. So she was 15 when this happened, and he was 40 something. He was like 43, maybe 46.
Not exactly healthy.
No. So there was there was a power imbalance, right? She was very inexperienced. There were drugs involved. So, you know, he was kind of luring her with, you know, these behaviors. And then, on top of that, they were practicing, kinky behavior. They were doing different, he liked to be strangled. That was his kink. Right. But there's this awareness in the BDSM community called RAC, which means risk aware consensual kink. And it really meshes well with libertarian principles. It says that I get to take responsibility for the risks that I take. And because I'm in a space with another partner who's also taking those risks, we have a responsibility to be aware of what they are and to dialogue about them and to establish a boundary of trust around how we manage that risk, right? So I don't know, I mean, this should be obvious to everybody, but it wasn't obvious to an inexperienced,
15-year-old.
young, you know, a 15-year-old, that if you're strangling someone, they can't say the safe word, right? So there are other ways to handle that risk, like Leslee mentioned, a hand signal. Well, he failed to communicate, basically to educate her on what the risk was and how to handle that risk. And so he died. He died in the middle of a consensual act, and it was really his fault. But because of the way that the state categorizes criminal behavior, she was tried as an adult, and she's serving 10 years in prison right now. And it was very, you know, she was already a runaway. She was already, you know, dealing with all kinds of trauma from her family life. She panicked. She fled the scene. She didn't know what to do. Oh my gosh, this guy died. And, you know, the cops showed up and they were questioning her. And I'm sure you can imagine how that, you know, didn't look very good for her. And that's, you know, it was all about the social, the stigma of the behavior and the prejudices of the enforcement officers. They sent her up the river. She's in prison right now, and she'll be there for a while.
Oh, that story breaks my heart.
Moment of silence. All right.
So another wonderful opportunity for all of you watchers to practice your allyship comes with the FDA regulation against blood donation from men who have sex with men. This includes not just gay men, but bisexual and pansexual men. Because of the risk of sexually transmitted diseases and bloodborne diseases, the FDA has put a regulation. It used to be an outright ban, but now it is a 6-month, 1 year ban on blood donations from men who have sex with men within that 1 year period. So you have to have been celibate for a year. We saw this hit the news strongly after the Pulse massacre in Orlando, where we had Pulse attendees who were denied the opportunity to give blood and help their friends and family who had been at the scene because they had recently had sex with either their friends or their partners inside within the last year. This is a violation of our self-responsibility again. There are many ways that we could handle blood donations through regulatory bodies and safely without the force of the state behind it. Mike's got some more to say on this one.
So
right?
the I forgot what if I had a personal story about this. Are we talking about disclosure laws?
Oh, that definitely applies to this.
All right. So in some states, of course, everyone's aware of HIPAA, right? It protects your medical privacy. So in general, it's very well accepted that a person's medical conditions are private. They can choose on their own terms to disclose or not, but no one can be compelled to share their medical details with another person.
So basically, it's your personal health information becomes your property.
Exactly. So there's, I see now I jumped ahead. I have no idea what example I forgot.
It's okay. But, I forgot earlier.
Yeah. So as long as we're in this on this talking point, I'll just stick with it. So in some states, and this came out of the scare of the 80s, in some states it's actually well, a felony. Like you can get, there are people serving multiples of decade sentences right now for not even transmitting HIV. And this is not like I said, we meet people where they're at, right? So not everybody really is fully aware of this right now. There's still quite a lot of stigma, but a person who's adhering to their care regimen today can be undetectable. So they're functionally negative. Which is not to say that disclosure is still not a healthy thing to do, but it is only to say that if a person is undetectable and they use a condom, then they've really done their due diligence, right? And the bottom line with a question about personal responsibility is that if I'm engaging in a behavior and I understand that that behavior is risky and I choose to take that risk anyway, then according to the Libertarian Party platform, it says right in there, individuals have a right to knowingly accept the risks for the consequences of their personal decisions, right? So, you know, that's just how it is. I mean, if you come down with any other illness, you don't get to like throw the other person in jail. That's what. So anyway, where I'm going with this is HIV criminalization. So there are still states where you are basically supposed to walk around shouting unclean, disclosing to, like, if you can, there are some people who recommend that you actually get a waiver signed by your partner. And it's just kind of, it's not okay. There's a guy in, I think it's Iowa, maybe, who was, he spit at a cup. Okay, you can't transmit HIV from spit. It doesn't even carry the virus. So I'm just kind of rambling. So that's an example of the state initiating force against a human being to control their right to take responsibility on their own terms for their private medical information.
So how this comes back to GSM allyship is the criminalization of HIV-infected individuals is not treated equally to other transmitted diseases. We've seen this in the vaccine debates where where the common libertarian position is no forced vaccines. If somebody catches it from you, like, it's difficult to prove it, that kind of thing. If you can prove it, then they're in Libertopia or Ancapistan or any of these other hypothetical worlds where we don't have a coercive state, there are civil ways to go about you. Sex is never perfectly safe. Education community, we try not to use the words safe sex because it's never perfectly safe. We try to use the words safer sex, which ties in with the BDSM idea of risk-aware. Consensual kink has risk. If a person is doing the best they can to mitigate any of the risks that come about from sex, like, that's the best they can do. Like, we shouldn't criminalize people who are already taking responsibility for themselves and their actions.
Right. So just to round out this section, there's a couple of other examples that should be pretty obvious, but I'll just mention them. One of them is adoption. So there are still places where the coercive power of state is used to prevent even married couples who can now marry, who didn't used to be able to, but now can, but still can't, you know, build a family around that marriage by actually adopting a child. And the last one, which has been talked about so much, that hopefully most libertarians are aware of, how the state is initiating force on restrooms, right? So they don't have the right to walk into the restroom, inspect your genitals, compare it to your ID card, and then put you in a cage if they don't match.
Apparently North Carolina thinks it does.
Apparently North Carolina thinks so. So I hope that by going through all of this, we've just given you like a window into how much libertarian philosophical approaches have to offer the GSM community. Like, we have so many empowering things we can say to so many different issues that the mainstream left won't even touch. A lot of these things are considered, you know, unspeakable by the sort of respectability, the conformist. I don't know. I don't want to demonize people who choose to conform. Like, it's okay to conform if you want, but the liberal left is built around mainstream values. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So anything that's considered like edgy, or, you know, that might endanger the majority's right to assimilate is pushed to the fringes, right? So all of those people those are our people, and we have powerful answers to their questions, so the message I just want you to get from that is, come back to our other seminars, because we just dumped a lot of ideas into a short space.
Yeah. Another term for that is homocentric. The left tends to center their talks about GSM rights or gay marriage rights, gay rights, around homosexual couples, generally white cis males, who live a monogamous lifestyle, who are adopting, who have that white picket fence. The beauty that libertarianism has to offer the rest of the queer community is that we're not forcing these cultural values on people. We're allowing them to live their lives as queer as they want to live them. And we're not imposing our standards on them, which the left has unintentionally through their actions and their verbiage.
Well, in some cases, even intentionally, and we'll probably get into this.
I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Well, and another word there is normativity. And there's this whole sort of thing where when the leaders of the movement were deciding what priorities to set, and they decided that marriage was going to be a priority, and they were asking themselves, how can we convince mainstream America that we deserve what they have? And so normative identities were centered, and non-conforming identities were considered embarrassing, were considered political liabilities.
Yeah, so let's talk about how this, when the Supreme Court granted us the right to legal marriages, it was still between two people. One of the pride points that the Libertarian Party has is that the Libertarian Party has always been open since our inception back in the 70s. We have always been open to both queer and polyamorous marriages. A large portion of the U.S. population, we're up at like 10% of U.S. population has some form of a non-monogamous relationship now. One of the pride points we have is that we have always been here for both GSM marriages and polyamorous marriages. So the last section that we're going to move into is this implementation. So we've given you guys a lot to think about when it comes to the overlap of issues between libertarianism and GSM, and how libertarianism affects our GSM issues. But we want to give you a few action points here so that you can go out and practice it. We've dropped a few throughout, but we're going to just reiterate them all right now.
So the number one, to just remind you all, please do not tokenize our existence. We are not here as a face for you to wear on Pride Festival Day and then to ignore us the rest of the year. I'm not like saying that in an accusatory way. I'm just saying it's something that
You don't
has
need to give
happened. I mean, I'm sorry. That's like one of the only times we ever hear from almost anybody, which is like, I understand people want to be allies. I'm not saying that people are in this party are not welcoming or inclusive. I'm just saying, please, if you really desire to be a strong ally and an effective ally, that has to be something that happens the entire year, not just Pride season, not just when you need a volunteer, not just when you need a banner to hang up at your fundraiser so you can, you know, I'm digressing. So thank you for, thanks in advance for recognizing that. So now here are some things you can do. Encourage candidates. So, go ahead, Leslie.
Oh, I was going to say, you can encourage your local and your state candidates to refer to our community and specifically to outright libertarians for answers when they're asked GSM-based, issue-based questions. This would have been extremely useful if our presidential candidate had asked us what the outright libertarian position was on baked cakes. But
again, that horse has left the barn, so... next time, maybe you could pick up the phone and call us first, because we will help you. We're here to help you. We are here as a resource. And the next point would be, oh, go ahead.
Oh, our number and our email is listed on the PDF form that we put out. All of our social media sites should include contact information. If you are a candidate or an activist and you want to know the GSM issue-based responses to any of these questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can find us, both Mike and I, on social media, as well as our official presence as outright libertarians.
Yes. Another great way to, one of the easiest things to do is to just know your terminology so that you can have a reasonable dialogue with another person on their terms. So I know we used a lot of words in this webinar today, and it's really beyond the scope to define each one of them, but we're going to be doing another webinar called Terminology 101, and that's going to be in October. So if you heard us using phrases like, you know, polyamory and
pansexual, you know, or
biphobia or heterosupremacy, there's a bunch of prefixes and suffixes, and you can mix and match those to say really precise things when you want to. And then there are some of the words that aren't even like about prefixes or suffixes, but we're going to go into all of that.
Which is a thing that as libertarians we tend to have a preference for. Words mean things, and we like to use the most specific word possible, which is why we have so much infighting between minarchists and anarchists, because they're not the same thing. We have left libertarians and right libertarians. We have all of these different groups with all of these different terms that they use. It's mirrored in the GSM community. We have our own set of terminology. So if you come to Terminology 101, October 5th, same time, same place on YouTube Live, you can get a basic understanding of how the GSM community communicates with each other and how you can best communicate with them about these issues. Because, you know, I hate to say it, but trolls on the internet are going to jump on your throat if you use the wrong word.
They are, and it's just to reemphasize the point from earlier, like these words have not been invented by the left to divide us. Like they've been developed as people have been able to come out of the closet and explore the space outside of it. So the words give us precise ways to talk about our lived experience outside the closet. So that's a good thing.
We use words to describe ourselves.
Yeah, we do. It's just like you wouldn't say, you know, you wouldn't say assault rifle when you really meant a really specific one. You know what I mean? And like, that's one that we know. Just say what you mean, and you can say what you mean when you have the word for it. I think one thing that pairs really closely with that is using inclusive languages. So remember the kind of conversation about pronouns and just be aware of those.
using siblings in liberty instead of brothers and sisters in liberty. These are active ways that you can go about doing that. When you're speaking as an official activist or candidate representing Libertarian Party, a great way for you to practice your allyship is to like actively use pronouns, use non-binary terminology, so that you don't exclude anybody in your area that would be interested in joining your party but feels out of place because they don't feel like you mean them when you're talking.
One more, actually, just on the tail end of that thought, liberal politicians use those, it's kind of like what's the word, like dog whistles? They kind of, like, it's coded language. They're trying to let the community know that they are standing up for us by using this language in this aware way, even though they're really, like, you know, using the state as a big, giant, brutal weapon. But in other words, for when our candidates are really able to bring that language out, then they're going to be able to show that we're competitive on that level. So there's so much power in doing that. A couple of other things you can do is just show up at Pride events and table for outright whenever you can. We have banners. I can send you, if you want to get a banner printed, I have a document that you can, I have a giant, like a big, a high-res thing you can get printed. We've got some copies of brochures we're going to link you to. You can have a GSM brainstorming night with your local LP affiliate. You know, you can. Oh,
social media activism. We forgot to put that in there.
Social media.
One of the useful things that I've seen.
No, go ahead.
One of the useful things that I've seen is Outright Libertarians' Facebook page. It is constantly posting, and I see individuals constantly posting, and they're trying to break this idea that libertarianism is socially conservative. One of the things that you can do to be an effective ally for us is to post about these issues at the overlap between libertarianism and GSM, and post about them consistently in a positive light, and offer libertarian solutions to GSM things on your social media so that you can spread awareness that libertarianism is right for the GSM community.
So we're almost down to, we're kind of up to the almost point where we had kind of blocked out, actually we're past the point, but we blocked out the final portion for questions. And I'm kind of wondering if, should we be looking on the YouTube to see if there are people who have questions?
We should, because I don't see anybody talking in our Hangouts chat.
Yeah, and I'm kind of assuming somebody somewhere must be watching.
Let's see if we have anybody on Facebook.
While you're looking for those things, I'll go ahead and let people know about the outreach materials that we're going to be linking to.
I made them into a beautiful PDF.
There's a beautiful PDF that Leslee has prepared. It contains a link to Get Your Laws Off Our Backs, which is the document we talked to you about earlier with the list of different harms of state. There's the World's Gayest Political Quiz, which takes the world's smallest quiz that we're all very familiar with, and it puts a GSM slant on that. It cycles it through the gay agenda and spits it back out with rainbow all over it. Woo! There's a brochure that is basically like a membership brochure. It talks about some of our issues. And the really cool one is the Ralph Raico pamphlet on gay rights, which was written in the 70s. This is a great one when anybody tries to say that it's doing revisionist history to say that we were inclusive from the beginning. No, there are actual Stonewall veterans that were in our movement that wrote really insightful critiques of the hetero supremacy that that they were seeing all around them, and how it was being implemented by the state. And so we're going to link you to that. And they'll, yes, Leslee.
We have a lot of comments.
We do? Where?
Apparently on our YouTube page. We're so sorry, everybody. We thought that it would pull the YouTube comments into Hangouts on air, which is what we're broadcasting on, and apparently this is not a thing that Google thought to do. So we're sorry if we haven't been answering any of your questions.
Well, let's go through it now.
There's a playback echo. I'm sorry. I really hope that's figured itself out. We have some people who are very excited that we're doing this. Oh, so Eric Ratsup mentioned the shirt that I'm wearing. It was from the Libertarian Party of North Carolina's response to Amendment 1, which was the first Amendment on our state constitution, which banned GSM marriage rights. Thankfully, it was overturned when the Supreme Court made their decision, but we had these wonderful, awesome shirts. We gave them all away at a roller derby night after the Supreme Court decision because we finally won that battle. It was great. Chip mentions that he hadn't thought about the brothers and sisters issue, and that siblings is a good substitute. Also, he told me to, damn it, Leslie, stop making sense.
If you see me grinning, it's because I'm reading through some of the stuff.
I can't see you now, but
Oh, you can't see me?
Hey, no, Eric. There actually is a Pink Pistols group in the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area. Remind me, and I'll add you to it. After Orlando, I made like a bunch of new groups for the state. So,
Oh, you guys are great. I just thank you for watching today. We're gonna link all of this stuff. Actually, if you're still, let me paste this all. I'm gonna paste these links to you right now.
Okay, they're also in the thing that I put on the Hangouts, but I guess it's not over here.
Here's a whole
bunch so many
links.
Social media options. Thank you. We're sorry that we didn't respond to those guys. We didn't see them.
Well, it's all right. We said to leave it. We said to save them till the end. So.
Yeah. So we're going to link you all those wonderful things. But I really hope that today was a good, fresher introduction to how to be an effective ally for the GSM community and for outright libertarians. We invite you to join us for our next webinar in this new series that Mike and I are trying to institute, which will be on. We are instituting October 6th. I may have that wrong on the PDF, but October, same time, same place here on YouTube.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm not allowed to paste a link into the chat because.
Oh, you can't wonder if I can.
I don't. Well, maybe because if you're on as the page, you might be able to, but I'm on as a human being, so I can't.
It thinks you're spamming.
It thinks I'm spamming.
Hey, I did
it. Any of you can reach out to me online, and I can get stuff to you later. Oh, there you go. Cool. Yeah.
How can we pitch libertarianism to modern liberals? The best way to pitch libertarianism to modern liberals is to talk about libertarianism history as part of the liberal tradition. Jeffrey Tucker does a really great job of this. He has a post called "Libertarianism as Part of the Liberal Tradition." It talks about individualism and how individualism and liberty are the key points of libertarianism. So when we talk to liberals, we could talk about how we have always been here to allow people to express themselves, allow our individual creative queer natures to come out, how we are advocating for a world where the state and other coercive systems are not limiting people. This is how, without government, you would not be fired from your job.
No, can I just jump in?
Yeah.
But first of all, on that point, discrimination cases are notoriously difficult to bring because the person could just say, I mean, it is really easy to just I mean, people know how to cover their tracks and fire you anyway if they want. So that is like, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does. I'm just saying that that's kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't dismiss it. I mean, I wouldn't tell the person you're fucking crazy. It's not even an issue, because it is. But I'm saying, gloss it over or something. But here's what I was going to say, though, like before you said that, because that was a red herring. Just kidding. So anti-war issues are a really a real weakness for the mainstream left, because what I have learned through kind of calling that out on my Facebook page is that GSM people are extremely uncomfortable with Hillary and her war hawkishness. And they're not really letting that come to the surface. There's a lot of suppressed like cognitive dissonance there. So really upholding our non-interventionism and our desire to live in a peaceful world. I'm trying to think, how would I tell somebody to their face to like, shut up, you're not going to get fired? Leslie, do you have an idea for that?
So one of the ways to handle that is to talk about various employment options that are through the free market. Without government, you would not be fired, because the majority of people anyway are employed through the free market, through private businesses, or self-employed. The majority of people are not employed through the state. But if the state were to not exist, the roles that it has in society would find peaceful free market, similar roles. Instead of the FDA, you might have a voluntary regulatory body that the industry puts together and consults and uses. These jobs would still be there. They would just be there without coercive force. Instead of a police department, you might have a private security force that people pay into a membership or something like that. The job is still there. The coercive nature behind it is gone.
Thank you. And I guess I want to, I do want to apologize, because I really made it sound like I was kind of flippant towards that. And I do want to, I need to take a moment and be serious about the fact that employment discrimination does happen. And it especially happens to trans people. But I would just really come back to that. Those cases are really hard to prove. And if they want to fire you, they can, and they will. But I think that one of the really, one of the things that gives me a lot of hope is seeing how just by coming out and by letting people know that we exist and that we are your friends and your families and your coworkers, over time, those social attitudes have changed. And all of that is a free market kind of activity. The state didn't force us to come out. The state didn't force one another to know that we were out. The state didn't open the closet. We did that. And it changed the dynamic for everybody. So the idea that you would get fired today is much less common than it was 40 years ago. And it's almost unheard of, for a white cisgender gay man or woman. It's still more common for transgender people, but even so, it's still less common. Do you see what I mean? So in other words, I'm not saying it doesn't still happen, but I'm saying that the bigots are going to die eventually. That's just the bottom line. They're dying out. And
thankfully, I saw
today is not the world we lived in before.
You're going to love this. I saw a number from, I think it was GLAAD that came out. 80% of the millennial generation identifies as GSM.
Wow.
80%. We have reached a point where society is refusing to be in the closet. We are exploring our identities and actively living them without as much fear as previously had. It's been speculated that in the past these numbers have been pretty consistent, but it was the fear of societal retribution that kept people in the closet. Chip brought up a point, though, that if you get fired for being outed as a libertarian or being outed as GSM. Unfortunately, that is one of the negative consequences of having freedom of association. But do you really want your money, your income coming from people who actively are against you? I know plenty of GSM individuals in the South who worked for Chick-fil-A but quit after they had this huge scandal. So that freedom of association goes both ways. It's risky, but one of the beauties of libertarianism is that self-responsibility. So you get to find another free market private business out there who's willing to employ you, and you don't have to feel icky about where your money comes from.
You know, another thing that comes to mind for me is that GSM people in general are, you know, well known for our creativity. So I would maybe suggest that the market is, you know, if there are workplaces that are self-selecting to choosing to kind of keep, you know, outside of the box thinkers, not saying that non-GSM people are always in the box or that like there's a perfect correlation there, but you know, they may be placing themselves at a competitive disadvantage. So there's a lot of power, right? Yes, you are. There's a lot of power in saying, okay, well, guess what? You don't get to sell me then. Bye-bye, you know? You don't get to take my labor and then sell it at a profit. And guess what? I'm taking my value and I'm walking away and I'm going to work for your competitor or somebody else's competitor. And we're going to experience financial success.
Yeah, well, you won't. A sister philosophy to libertarianism is agorism, and this ability to operate a free market or a black market that is counter to the state-run markets. Freelancing is becoming but a much more popular thing in the younger generations, particularly the millennial generation. They're embracing this idea of a laptop lifestyle or a digital nomad. That is definitely an option for many GSM youth to find employment, find income without having to be employed by the state or bigots.
Absolutely. So we're kind of winding down. We've got about 7 minutes left. I want to definitely thank everybody that stayed through to the end. It's really actually encouraging that people actually listen, because I remember doing our podcast and finding out later there were 0 listeners, and that made me really sad. So yay! Thank you all for being here. We'll hang out for a few more minutes, so if anybody has any additional questions, go ahead and post those in the chat. Leslie, did you have any summarizing thoughts?
Actually, earlier I saw this. Hold on. You talk for a minute.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Eric, for the kind thought. You know, I guess I'll put Leslie on the spot real quick. Leslie has been kicking total ass.
Oh no, don't you dare to do this.
As an outright ally. And I know actually Eric is at his local level as well. So, and Justin, as a matter of fact, too. I want to thank, actually, now that I'm mentioning all of you, I'll put you all in the spot. Thank you for everything that you do for this organization, because, you know, at various times in my term, there has been varying degrees of, and I don't know if Carrie's still on, but Carrie's one of these people too, who, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm doing it all myself, and sometimes I actually am. And then, you know, other times I'm not. And right now is one of those times that we have quite a few active volunteers, and I can't thank you enough, because it makes such a huge difference, not only in how well we can reach GSM people and accomplish our mission of being that bridge, but how well the Libertarian Party as a whole can connect to the general public. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for being the spearhead behind Outright Libertarians right now and leading us into all these wonderful new things, particularly with this very difficult election season.
Oh, yeah. Don't even get me started.
Well, on that note, I have a beer right here that has been sitting here, and I was afraid to drink it due to YouTube's no alcohol on screen thing. So I'm going to go and drink my beer. We will see you next month, October 6th, for our Terminology 101. Good night.
Yay! Good night, everyone.